Hello everyone, Deb Floros for Jesse James Beads. I'm working with some amazing things from the Magic Emporium collection from Jesse James Beads. And I fell in love with the Peachy Dream connector and the Sun and Surf Impression Jasper stone beads. I'm going to use some 24 gauge wire and we're going to do some wire wrapped beads and create a wire wrapped bead bracelet with that connector as our center point. The cube beads are so perfect for this kind of project. They're just interesting and add some cool shape, and the stone has so much variation in it. It's really cool. So I'm pre-cutting some pieces of wire. You can cut as many as you think you're going to need. I cut some and I ended up having to cut some later. So I've got maybe about 4 or 5 inches. And what I'm doing is creating a wire wrap loop to get started. So I'm just using some chain nose pliers. I'm wrapping the wire around the chain nose, and then I'm doing about 3 wraps. Then I'm putting the bead onto my wire, and then I'm going to wire wrap it on the other side of the bead. So just creating that loop, pulling the wraps around, and then I'm snipping off the excess wire. And you can use your nipping or cutting pliers to do that. Now, I like to straighten out my loops with chain nose pliers, and then I move on to creating the next one. And I just do the same process, just trying to follow the same size of loop that I create with my round nose pliers and the same number of wraps. So I've got some consistency as I wrap the beads for this bracelet. So I'm just wrapping and wrapping. This is actually kind of a relaxing project when you've got lots of beads to wrap. You could actually create an entire wire wrapped bead necklace with the size and length of the strand of these beads. There's so many of them that you get. So then you're going to connect the two before you complete your wrap. So you'll add your loop onto the other loop and then you'll wrap around from there. And you're just going to continue that as you go. Now, as you go, you may want to hold on to your loop and wrap the wire around. As you start to add more beads, it becomes a little bit more challenging to hold on. So I like to get in with my chain nose pliers and hold on to my loop and wrap. Now you'll want to make sure that you know what size you're going to create. And it will matter in terms of how many beads you need to wrap on either side of the connector. And you'll need to make sure that you account for the length of the connector and your clasp. Both of those things will take up length. So I wrapped a bead directly onto my connector. So doing the same thing that I normally do when connecting a bead, I'm just connecting it directly on to one loop on that connector. Then you can add your beads on the other side. You can just add one to the other side or do your entire strand except the last bead and wrap it on. It works both ways. However you want to do it is what's right for you. So then I'm going to finish off the other side, making sure I have the same number of beads. So that's why the measuring is pretty important. You'll want to make sure you wrap the same number of beads. So I'm going to continue on and wrap a few more to make it equal to the other side. And I just like to make sure that I do the same exact process every time I wrap a bead and attach it onto the bracelet. So doing my little wrap, holding on to that loop, and then wrapping around, making sure that my wraps are the same number and consistent with the one before it. So I'm liking how this looks. Then I want to come in with my chain nose and kind of clean up the bracelet before I put my clasp on. So I just want to tighten up my wrapped ends, making sure that the end of the wire is tucked in. And then I just kind of straighten out each of those loops. Sometimes when you're working with a small gauge wire, you get a little bit of wonkiness as you go. I used 24 gauge. I also think that 22 gauge is really good for this project. So that's looking good. The beads match this connector so perfectly. And I'm just gonna do a simple lobster claw and jump ring closure. So to one side, I'm gonna use a 4mm jump ring and a medium-sized lobster claw. And I'm going to attach that to one end. Then I've got a larger jump ring that I'm going to add to the other side, and that will be what I attach my lobster to. Now, if you don't like to do the wire wrapping and attaching the two things, you can do your wire wrapped beads and attach the beads with jump rings in between. That's an alternate way to make this piece. You probably will have more length that way. I love how this came out. Try out all of these beautiful Magic Emporium pieces at jessijamesbeads.com. Thank you so much for watching.